Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to map out your landscape on your good cotton rag paper. This is the landscape that I'm going to be using today. This is just from an old calendar. And what I've done already is I've just taken my pencil here and I've just mapped out the very basic areas, and it's really faint. And if I hold it up close, you can see some of my pencil lines here. And the reason that this is very faint is once I start painting on top of this, the pencil cannot be erased under the watercolor. It's pretty permanent on the paper. So I've just mapped out just basic areas where I know I need to place different areas on the landscape. So my sky up here, this kind of grassy mountainy area, I put kind of a strip for my blue right here, and then some of these kind of curved lines so I know where to make the lighter tones of my yellow. So I am going to work traditionally in the background and come to the foreground, and I'm going to lay down all of my base colors first. So I am going to put down very transparent washes of everything first, and then once I start developing the landscape more, I am going to put more detail, shading, and blending on top of my base. So I'm going to start with my blue of the background, and I'm going to use the leaving white technique because there are clouds in my sky. Now this is a reference, and you can kind of have a little artistic liberty when you're making your clouds and stuff, but we want to match things as close as possible. This is a photograph as well, and watercolor is transparent, so it's going to look a little bit different. So I've loaded my paintbrush with water and color, and I'm going to go ahead and start kind of putting in some of those little fluffy kind of areas. And it comes out kind of dark at first, so I can go back in with a little bit of water and kind of blend some of those tones and areas out. So I want to pick up my paintbrush. I'm using mostly the side of it here, and I want to pick up my paintbrush to show different white areas and making it kind of fluffy here. The other thing that I'm going to do is in this section of my landscape, I am going to paint some water down. So I'm going to use the wet on wet technique in this area, and that's going to help me spread out the paint a little bit more. So it's already nice and saturated on the paper. It will only go as far as my line here because that's where I want it to stop. I don't want it to go into the mountain. And then I have the drier paper here, which helps when I'm laying down some of these white areas. Technically I'm laying down the blue, but I'm leaving white to show clouds. So anything, if it's looking a little too rough, I can go back in with a little water and kind of blend some of that out a little bit. So I can get specific against the edge here, and I can blend that up. And because I'm showing what would be considered fade, I am having that different tone from darkest to lightest in my sky to show some of that depth. So I can always go back in here too and paint a little bit darker tone in the sky and use water to kind of wash that out. And the nice thing about the cotton rag paper is you're going to notice that you can really blend and layer a lot on top of it. It really is very forgiving, and it really can take a lot of paint and water. So I'm going to keep spreading out some water over in this area, kind of do a wash. Already has a little paint on it, so it's going to have that like lightest tone. I'm going to pick up some more paint here and add a few more kind of cloud-ish areas. So adding those darker tones in between, kind of lifting up my paintbrush, using more of the side of my paintbrush here, kind of gives that illusion that there are some clouds in the sky. And I can always grab more water. So if I went a little too dark too fast, I can always grab water and kind of blend that out a little bit. And that's what's nice about putting down our base washes first on these areas, because I can spread that paint out a little bit. So I didn't match the clouds identically, but I am showing that there are clouds in the sky here because I've left that white area. So it does look like there's like these billowy clouds coming in. So my next area, I'm not going to focus on detail yet. We are going to fill this in kind of like a coloring book first, where we're just going to have these base washes, and then once this dries I can go back in and add detail. So because I am just doing a wash, I want to do the wet on wet technique because it's going to help me spread out my green a little bit quicker. So I'm just going to paint the water in this area kind of quickly. And I can do sections at a time too if I wanted. So I can have this whole thing painted with water, and that's what I'm doing right now. Or I can just kind of work a section at a time. So I'm going to take my green and I'm just going to lay that in there, get right up to my edge, and blend that out. And because the paper is already wet, it helps me blend the green out a little bit quicker. And I don't have to be too perfect with this either, because I am going to put detail on top, and I'm going to use more saturated tone so I can kind of show a little bit of gradients in my base color as well to help give a little bit more depth. So that's why I'm not being too perfect with my base colors. I'm just kind of filling in the areas that I need to, just so that I have that base of color. And my next area here, this is where I can do a little bit of blending. So I'm going to probably put down a wash of blue, kind of make it really light, and I'm going to probably blend a little bit of green in there to give that kind of blue-green kind of color. So that would be this area here. And because my green is still wet, I do want to kind of be careful because I don't want the two to bleed together. So I might need to wait a few minutes in order for that area to dry a little bit more. So I'm going to lay down some blue. And it's okay if it's a little dark to begin with, because again, anything that you lay down, you can go back in with water and spread and blend that out so that it's a lighter tone. So I can pick up some color, I can pick up some water, and I can spread that out. And again, I'm not being very careful because it's okay if I have these variation of tones and gradients in there. So now I'm going to go back in with a little bit of green, and those are going to start to blend together. So this is where I can blend right on my paper, and that's what's nice about the cotton rag paper, is it is more durable and can take that blending right on the paper a little bit more. So I got a little bit of a glare here, but you can see where I'm kind of blending those together. So I might need to let that dry. That's actually pretty saturated there. But what I can do is on my landscape here, remember we follow the color rules. So I might just put down some of these streaks of yellow that are in here and start separating out some of these areas while this dries a little, and then I can put some streak of yellow right in there. So I'm just going to rinse out my paintbrush. I use a little bit of paper towel to dry that a little bit, and I can pick up some yellow here, and I can kind of follow that pattern that I have on my landscape, and I can use a little bit of water to spread that out. So everything is going to be a base color first. There's not going to be any detail. Detail is going to come very, very last. So these are all going to be just kind of flat colors that build up your page. And if I wanted to, the yellow blends in with the orange, so I could start carefully kind of placing in some of the orange here as well, getting that to kind of blend out. So slowly but surely, you are just going to fill your paper from background to foreground with just your base colors. And we did this with the colored pencil assignment, so you already know how to map out basic shapes and then put in those base colors. And then if I want, I can go red, and because my colors are wet, they're going to blend pretty nicely here. So I can kind of fill in those areas. I can use water to blend it out. That's what I like about watercolor, is it kind of fills in that area pretty quickly to begin with. And then I can use the smaller brushes to add detail later. And I can blend those tones right on my page. Alright, so that is how you would map out your landscape. I obviously still have some more white area to fill in, but we start in the background and then work to the foreground. And once these areas are dry, I can go back in with wet on dry, so my paintbrush is going to have more color, less water to do any of the detail work that I would need in my landscape.